The fluorescent lights of the station flickered, casting harsh shadows across Sophia's tear-stained face. Her phone screen glared back at her with the final text. "Don't bother coming home. Your things are on the curb." The weight of her reality crushed against her chest as she clutched her vintage purse. Rain tapped against the glass ceiling, creating a symphony of desperation that matched her racing heartbeat. She had believed Marcus when he promised a new start, a job waiting for her, a place to stay. Now she stood alone, her cardigan too thin against the autumn chill. Her fingers trembled as she approached the ticket counter, the words catching in her throat. "I need to get to Westbrook, but I'm $5 short." The attendant's face hardened, eyes already moving to the person behind her in line. The polished bench felt cold beneath her as she sank down, mind racing through options that didn't exist. 300 miles from home with burned bridges behind her and nowhere ahead. Her gaze fixed on the departure board as minutes ticked away. 3 suitcases lined up beside her feet, everything she owned packed into mismatched luggage that had belonged to her grandmother. The oldest one gaped open, revealing the corner of a nursing textbook she'd sacrificed everything to study. The bench shifted as someone sat beside her, the scent of expensive cologne cutting through the musty station air. She kept her gaze down, unwilling to invite conversation, until a deep voice broke through her thoughts. "The Westbrook train leaves in 10 minutes. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray against olive skin, not a single crease to betray the late hour. What caught her attention wasn't the obvious wealth or the sharp jawline, but the stillness about him, the kind of calm that suggested he was accustomed to storms. Sophia straightened her spine, pride rising despite her circumstances. "I don't need charity." The words came out sharper than intended, brittle with the embarrassment of being seen so clearly in her moment of defeat. "It's not charity," he replied, voice low enough that only she could hear. "It's an investment." He slid a crisp $50 bill across the bench between them. When she didn't move to take it, his lips curved into the faintest smile. Sophia's hand closed around the bill before her mind had fully decided. "How will I pay you back?" she asked, already rising, already calculating how this strange encounter would become yet another debt she couldn't repay. "You won't," he said simply, hands sliding into his pockets. "Just remember that not everyone who offers help wants something in return." As Sophia hurried toward the ticket counter, heart pounding with unexpected reprieve, she glanced back once more. She couldn't know then how those eyes would haunt her dreams, or that the $50 would be the smallest debt between them. The train whistle pierced the night as she clutched her ticket, unaware that destiny had just changed its course. 2 weeks later, Sophia had settled into a cramped studio apartment in Westbrook, the kind where the shower dripped all night, and neighbors argued through paper-thin walls. She had found work at a diner, serving coffee with a smile that never quite reached her eyes and pocketing tips that barely covered groceries. The memory of the stranger at the station had begun to fade like an old photograph, edges blurring into the background of survival. She had more pressing concerns, rent due in 10 days and a bank account that laughed at the notion. Winter arrived early in Westbrook, harsh and unforgiving as it swept through the streets. Sophia wrapped her threadbare scarf tighter as she hurried home after her double shift, the cold biting through her coat as if it weren't even there. The small bookstore on the corner caught her eye, not because of the display of bestsellers in the window, but because of the man standing inside. Even through the frost-laced glass, she recognized the straight shoulders, the composed stillness that had struck her that night at the station. Her feet stopped without permission, heart stuttering an uneven rhythm. She had never expected to see him again. Certainly not here in this forgotten corner of a city too large to make such coincidences believable. His gaze lifted from the book in his hands, somehow sensing her presence through the glass and crowds. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by something Sophia couldn't name, something that made her stomach tighten with an emotion halfway between fear and anticipation. Before she could decide whether to flee or approach, he was moving toward the door. Sophia remained frozen on the sidewalk, snowflakes collecting in her hair as the stranger, her unexpected benefactor, stepped onto the street. "You made it to Westbrook," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered, deep and steady. Not a question, just acknowledgement of a fact he had somehow known would come to pass. "How did you know I'd be here?" The words tumbled out before she could catch them, suspicion threading through her voice. No one appeared in someone's life twice by accident, especially not someone like him. "I didn't," he answered, and somehow she believed him despite the improbability. "I own the publishing house 2 blocks down. This is where I come to remember why I started." He gestured toward the bookstore with a slight nod. Sophia noticed for the first time that he wasn't wearing an overcoat despite the biting cold. Without thinking, she blurted, "You must be freezing." The mundane observation felt absurdly normal in a moment that seemed anything but. "Coffee?" he asked, ignoring her comment about the cold. "There's a cafe around the corner that makes something worth the price." When she hesitated, he added quietly, "Still not charity. Just coffee between two people who've met before." The cafe was tucked between an antique store and a tailor shop, its windows fogged with warmth against the winter outside. Sophia settled into a booth across from the stranger, who had finally introduced himself as Adrian, her fingers curled around a mug of coffee that cost more than she made in an hour at the diner. "You never told me why you were at the station that night," she said, studying him over the rim of her cup. His calm demeanor hadn't changed, but something in the way his eyes scanned the room suggested vigilance rather than casualness. Adrian's attention shifted back to her, his response measured as if weighing each word. "I was meeting someone who didn't show. Sometimes disappointments lead us exactly where we need to be." The statement hung between them, heavy with meaning Sophia couldn't decipher. A group of men entered the cafe, their laughter too loud against the quiet atmosphere. Adrian's posture shifted subtly, a tightening of his shoulders, a sharpening of his gaze. So slight Sophia might have missed it if she hadn't been watching him so carefully. One of the men glanced their way, his smile faltering when he spotted Adrian. He quickly averted his eyes and guided his companions to the furthest table, his jovial demeanor replaced with something that looked remarkably like fear. "You have that effect on people," Sophia observed, curiosity overcoming her usual caution. "They look at you like they're afraid to breathe wrong." The unspoken question hung between them as she traced the rim of her mug. Adrian's expression remained unchanged, but his fingers stilled against the table. "People see what they expect to see. In this city, my family name carries weight, not all of it pleasant." He said it simply, without pride or apology. Sophia had heard whispers at the diner, names spoken in hushed tones, businesses that operated outside the law's reach. "Moretti," she said suddenly, the connection clicking into place. "You're Adrian Moretti. The papers mentioned your father's funeral last year." Something hard flashed in his eyes, quickly contained. "My father built an empire on fear. I inherited both his legacy and his enemies." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "But that's not a burden for you to carry." The revelation should have sent Sophia running, but instead, she found herself leaning forward. "Is that why you helped me? To rebel against what your father would have done?" The question was bold, perhaps reckless, but she needed to understand. Adrian regarded her for a long moment before answering. "I helped you because I recognized something in you that night. Determination, resilience, the will to survive when the world tells you to give up." His words stripped away her defenses, seeing too clearly the years of fighting to stay afloat. Behind the polished exterior and dangerous reputation, Sophia glimpsed something unexpected, a man carrying his own weight of expectations and broken promises. "We're strangers who happened to meet twice," she said, though something inside her doubted the simplicity of that statement. 3 days later, Sophia hurried through her shift at the diner, exhaustion pulling at her edges after a sleepless night spent calculating bills she couldn't cover. The morning rush had been brutal, customers demanding and tips sparse as the economic downturn tightened everyone's wallets. The bell above the door chimed as she balanced 4 plates along her arm. She glanced up, nearly stumbling when she recognized the composed figure standing in the entrance. Adrian, looking decidedly out of place in his tailored coat among the worn leather booths and chipped mugs. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and for a heartbeat, Sophia forgot the chaos around her. Then reality crashed back, as a customer snapped his fingers for her attention, breaking the moment with jarring rudeness. By the time she delivered the order, Adrian had settled into a corner booth, a newspaper spread before him, though his attention remained on her. Sophia approached his table, wiping her hands nervously on her apron, hyper-aware of curious glances from other servers. "This isn't exactly 5-star dining," she said by way of greeting, trying for lightness, despite the tension coiling in her stomach. The diner was the furthest thing from the elegant cafe they'd visited, its fluorescent lights unforgiving, and menu limited to greasy comfort foods. Adrian folded the newspaper with deliberate precision. Sometimes authenticity matters more than stars. His gaze traveled over the scattered customers, the outdated decor, before returning to her face. "You look tired." The simple observation, spoken without judgment, nearly undid her. Sophia's careful facade cracked, exhaustion seeping through as she admitted, "My landlord's raising the rent. I'm short $200 with 3 days to pay. She hadn't meant to confess her troubles, certainly not to him, but something about Adrian's steady presence made the words tumble out. A flush of embarrassment heated her cheeks as she realized how pathetic she must sound. Rather than offering immediate solutions or hollow sympathy, Adrian studied her face. Finish your shift. I'll wait. It wasn't a request, but not quite a command either. A statement of fact delivered with the certainty that she wouldn't refuse. The next 3 hours crawled by as Sophia navigated the lunch rush, all too aware of Adrian's presence in the corner booth. He declined refills, ordered nothing but black coffee, and kept his attention divided between his phone and her movements through the diner. When she finally untied her apron and gathered her purse, Sophia felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Adrian stood as she approached, leaving a tip that made her co-worker's eyes widen in disbelief. Outside, the winter sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. I don't need charity, Sophia said immediately, the same words she'd spoken at the station, though they sounded hollow even to her own ears. I'm not offering charity, Adrian replied, his breath clouding in the cold air between them. I have a proposition. My publishing house needs someone to manage the front office, someone organized, observant, and unafraid to speak their mind. His dark eyes held hers, challenging and assessing simultaneously. Sophia hesitated, suspicion warring with desperate need. Why me? You don't know anything about my qualifications. The job offer seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed to be anything but suspicious from a man whose family name made people lower their voices. A sleek black car pulled to the curb beside them, the driver stepping out to open the rear door without a word. Let me show you the office, Adrian said, not answering her question directly. Then decide. The publishing house occupied a renovated warehouse at the edge of the arts district, its brick exterior unmarked except for a discreet brass plaque reading Moretti Press. Inside, polished hardwood floors and exposed beams created a space both industrial and elegant. Adrian led her through rows of desks where editors and designers worked quietly, nodding respectfully as he passed. Unlike the men in the cafe, these employees didn't show fear. Their deference seemed born of genuine respect rather than intimidation. We publish everything from literary fiction to academic journals, Adrian explained, guiding her toward a glass-walled office overlooking the main floor. The position includes health insurance, starting immediately, and pays twice what you make at the diner. The offer was too good, and Sophia's instincts screamed caution, even as desperation whispered acceptance. What's the catch? She asked bluntly, turning to face him fully. Nobody offers this much to someone they barely know. Adrian's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, at her directness. The catch is that association with me comes with complications. My family's reputation means security concerns, unwanted attention, and certain social difficulties. Before she could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the building, glass shattering somewhere at the front. Adrian moved with startling speed, pulling Sophia away from the windows and toward a concealed door at the rear of the office. Stay here, he ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerous register she hadn't heard before. He pressed a button beneath the desk, and Sophia heard locks engaging throughout the building. Don't open this door for anyone but me. Left alone in what appeared to be a secure room, Sophia's heart pounded against her ribs. Through a small security monitor, she watched as Adrian moved through the building with lethal grace, flanked by 2 men who seemed to materialize from nowhere. Outside the building, a car idled with its door open, a brick lying amid shattered glass where it had been thrown through the front window. Even through the grainy security feed, Sophia could see the message wrapped around it, written in letters too large to miss. Debts must be paid. 20 minutes passed before Adrian returned, his expression controlled but tension radiating from his posture. He dismissed his men with a silent nod before closing the door behind him, sealing them in the safety of the secure room. Are you hurt? Sophia asked immediately, scanning him for injuries despite the absurdity of her concern for a man clearly accustomed to danger. Her hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Adrian shook his head, his gaze assessing her reaction with careful precision. This is the complication I mentioned. My father made enemies, and they believe his debts transfer to me. He moved to a small cabinet, retrieving 2 glasses and a bottle of amber liquid. Sophia accepted the offered drink, needing something to steady her nerves. The message on the brick, what debt are they collecting? She watched as something flickered across his composed features, a shadow of old pain quickly contained. Your father's business tactics weren't limited to publishing, were they? Sophia asked, connecting the dots between the elegant office and the aggressive security measures. The contradiction between Adrian's refined demeanor and the fortress-like precautions suddenly made perfect sense. Adrian traced the rim of his glass, memories darkening his expression. He began with one small printing press in the basement of our family home. By the time I was 12, he controlled half the city's imports through shell companies and intimidation. His voice carried no pride, only the weight of inherited sins. Sophia noticed a small photograph partially hidden behind his desk calendar, a younger Adrian in graduation robes, standing beside a stern-faced man with identical eyes. You tried to walk away once, she observed softly, understanding blooming as she recognized the Oxford emblem on his gown. You studied abroad to escape all this. My father borrowed money from the Castellano family to save his business 20 years ago. They've been paid back 3 times over, but Angelo Castellano believes interest accumulates eternally. Adrian's voice remained steady, despite the weight of his words. He leaned against the desk, suddenly looking weary beneath his polished exterior. My father died believing he could outrun his mistakes. I've spent the past year trying to legitimize everything he built while Castellano circles like a vulture. Sophia studied the amber liquid in her glass, connecting pieces of a puzzle she hadn't realized she was solving. The publishing house. It's your attempt to build something clean, something separate from whatever your father did. Adrian's eyes met hers, something like surprise flickering in their depths. Most people don't see that distinction. They look at me and see only my father's son. The admission carried vulnerability she hadn't expected from someone who moved through the world with such controlled power. Sophia set her glass down, mind racing with implications. Is this job offer real? Or was it just a convenient way to keep me close because you think I'm somehow involved in this? The direct question hung between them, demanding equal honesty. The job is real, Adrian answered without hesitation. Your involvement is circumstance. Being at that station the night Castellanos' men were supposed to meet me. They saw us together and assumed you were valuable to me. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They weren't entirely wrong. Something shifted in the air between them. An acknowledgement of connection neither had intended, but both felt with unsettling clarity. I can't offer you safety anymore, Adrian continued, his voice low. Accepting the job means accepting risk. I'll understand if you walk away. Sophia's life had been a series of calculated risks, leaving home, trusting Marcus, boarding that train to Westbrook. Yet something about this risk felt different, weighted with possibility rather than just survival. I need until morning to decide, she finally said, meeting his gaze directly. Sophia's apartment felt smaller than ever that night, the walls closing in as she paced the worn carpet. The sensible choice was clear. Walk away from Adrian Moretti, and whatever dangerous game surrounded him before she became collateral damage. Yet when she closed her eyes, she saw not the danger, but the moment in the cafe when Adrian had looked at her with recognition rather than pity. He had seen her struggle, and offered not rescue, but opportunity, a chance to stand on her own feet. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity as dawn broke through her thin curtains. Sophia dressed with deliberate care, choosing her most professional outfit, a navy skirt and white blouse she'd saved for interviews that never materialized. The evidence against Castellano filled 3 secure hard drives and a fireproof safe hidden behind a false wall in Adrian's private office. Each document represented not just crimes, but lives ruined, families threatened, and a city held hostage through decades of carefully orchestrated corruption. My father kept these as insurance, but never had the courage to use them, Adrian explained as they catalogued another file of offshore accounts. He became what he once fought against, a man so entangled in power that he forgot why he wanted it in the first place. Sophia's fingers brushed against a faded newspaper clipping tucked between financial records, Adrian's mother's obituary from 20 years earlier, the cause of death listed as home invasion. The realization hit her with stunning clarity. This isn't just about business for you, it's personal justice. The publishing house was quiet when she arrived, employees yet to trickle in for the day. Adrian stood by the repaired window, silhouetted against the morning light, his posture betraying no surprise when she entered. You came, he stated simply. I'm not naive, Sophia replied, crossing the polished floor with measured steps. I know this isn't just about filing papers and answering phones. I want to know exactly what I'm walking into. Adrian gestured toward his office, the glass walls now covered with security blinds that hadn't been there the day before. Castellano believes my father hid documents that could incriminate his family. He thinks I have them. His directness matched her own. Inside the office, Adrian unlocked a hidden panel behind his desk, revealing a safe embedded in the wall. These are what Castellano wants. Evidence of money laundering, bribery, and worse. My father kept insurance against the day Castellano might turn on him. The folder he removed contained photographs, bank statements, and handwritten notes spanning decades of corruption. With these, Castellano would face federal charges. Without them, he'll continue destroying lives while appearing respectable to the world. Sophia studied Adrian's face, seeing for the first time the burden he carried. Not just a business to legitimize, but a moral weight pressing down on every decision. Why not turn these over to authorities? She asked, the obvious question hanging between them. Because Castellano has judges and police captains on his payroll. The evidence would disappear before charges could be filed. Adrian's voice remained steady, but Sophia glimpsed the frustration beneath his control. I need someone I can trust to help organize this properly. Someone without connections to either family. The implication hung in the air. He was trusting her, a virtual stranger, with information that could get them both killed. Why me? Sophia asked again, needing to understand before she stepped fully into this dangerous world. Adrian's answer came without hesitation. Because that night at the station, you were ready to walk away, rather than accept help that felt like charity. Pride like that can't be bought. He held her gaze steadily. And because sometimes the universe places the right person exactly where they need to be. The decision crystallized in Sophia's mind. Unexpected yet somehow inevitable. I'll help you, but not from fear or gratitude. I'll help because what Castellano does is wrong, and sometimes standing against wrong is the only choice that matters. 3 months passed in a blur of carefully organized evidence, late nights poring over documents, and growing awareness of the danger surrounding them. Sophia learned to recognize Castellano's men, to notice patterns in surveillance, and to carry herself with the quiet confidence that kept unwanted attention at bay. The publishing house thrived under her organizational skills, becoming not just a cover, but a genuine success that brought a rare smile to Adrian's face when quarterly reports showed increasing profits. Their professional relationship evolved into something deeper, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Adrian taught her self-defense in the secure room after hours, his hands guiding her movements with careful precision. Never hesitate, he instructed, as she learned to break holds and strike vulnerable points. Hesitation gets you killed. Their first kiss changed everything, and nothing. They worked with renewed purpose the following day, shoulder to shoulder at Adrian's desk, as they matched evidence to statutes of limitation and criminal codes. The professional facade remained in front of others, but electricity sparked whenever their hands brushed. At night, Adrian would drive Sophia home in his unmarked car. Security protocols never relaxed, despite the growing warmth between them. Castellano's men are watching the apartment building, he observed one evening, voice tightening as he noted the suspicious sedan parked across the street for the third consecutive night. Without discussion, Sophia began staying at Adrian's penthouse, a space both luxurious and impersonal, as though he'd never fully moved in despite owning it for years. She added small touches gradually, a throw pillow, fresh flowers, her books stacked beside his bed. Each item a quiet declaration that this temporary arrangement was becoming something permanent. Sophia discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed, not just physical, but the steel within that allowed her to face danger without flinching. The frightened girl at the train station with $5 to her name felt like a distant memory. Their plan took shape gradually, meticulously, finding the one federal prosecutor not in Castellano's pocket, organizing the evidence into airtight cases that couldn't be dismissed, ensuring multiple copies existed in secure locations. Sophia's nursing textbooks gathered dust as she immersed herself in legal terminology instead. The tension between them grew with each passing day, unacknowledged, but impossible to ignore. It lived in shared glances that lingered too long, in fingers that brushed while passing documents, in the way Adrian positioned himself between her and doors whenever they were in public. One night as snow fell heavily outside the office windows, Sophia caught Adrian watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. "You've changed," he observed quietly. "Not who you are, but how you carry it." His words touched something deep inside her, recognition of the transformation these months had wrought, not just in circumstances but in her sense of self. Sophia moved toward him, caution finally giving way to honesty. "We both know this isn't just about Castellano anymore." Her voice remained steady, despite the vulnerability of the admission. It hasn't been for a while. Adrian's carefully maintained control slipped for just a moment, revealing the depth of feeling he'd hidden behind professional distance. Getting close to me is dangerous. Everyone I've ever cared about becomes a target. I became a target the moment you sat beside me at that station, Sophia replied, stepping closer until only inches separated them. But it was my choice to stay. It's still my choice. The declaration hung between them, stripping away the last pretense. When his lips finally met hers, it felt like inevitability, the culmination of a journey that began with $5 and a missed train. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him with a gentleness that belied his strength, and Sophia knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just purpose, but home. The evidence against Castellano was delivered the following week, triggering arrest that shook the city's power structure to its foundation. As headlines proclaimed the fall of a criminal empire, Adrian and Sophia stood on the platform of the same train station where they'd first met, his arm around her shoulders as snow drifted lazily from the winter sky. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because your support is what keeps me creating stories like this one.